So we'll move on here. So Lauren Boebert having problems, but now we got to move on to Trump, who had just a terrible, terrible couple weeks. He did the E. Jean Carroll trial. He got tagged for $83.3 million in penalties, right, that he owes her. So here's the deal with that. He's going to try and appeal it, but in order to appeal it, you have to put up a bond for the $83.3 million. He can't just skate on it, right? So he's got to put up a bond with the court. So typically the way that works is you'll find somebody to basically co-sign for the bond or sign for the bond, like a bond agency or a bank or something like that. Like, I'm sure you've seen like bail bonds and stuff before. I've heard of that. That's what they do is like, let's say I have a $10,000 bond that says, I'm out on bond or on bail, right? So I can't pay the $10,000. So usually what it is I'll pay $1,000 on the bond. But what I'll do is I don't have the $1,000. I'll go to the bail bond company. They'll pay the $1,000. They'll loan it to me at like some high interest, like 20%, right? But then what happens is if I don't show up to court, the full bond is due. The bail bondsman is now on the hook for the full 10 grand, the other 9. So that's where they get like the bounty hunter thing. So bail bondsmen hire bounty hunters. So when you sign for the bond, they get your address, your phone number, your friends, your family, everything. So they know how to go find you and drag you back to court. That's what bounty hunters do. That's all they do. They just drag people back to court.
That is a good job for so many people. You know what? So many people I think would just have fun just like dragging idiots back to court and being like, listen.
I think it's a bad system, but we could get into that's a whole nother situation. But that's what's going on. But the problem is Trump.
I don't know anything about that system, but I can just see some satisfaction for some people being like, listen, guy, you're going to court.
Right. But Trump's kind of in a problem with that. So here's what happens. So we'll get into more Trump here in a minute. But Alina Habba, his lawyer, right, after the $83 million verdict came down from the jury, she, in a desperate attempt for an appeal, because she screwed that case up so bad, she couldn't present evidence. She blamed the victim, said the victim should be grateful she got raped because now she's famous. Shit, it was just it was bad. She fucked that whole thing up. So, and that she's probably part of the reason he got that big of a judgment is because she was such a nightmare, and he was a nightmare too. But she, in a last-ditch attempt to try and appeal this, did this maneuver where she sent a letter to the judge after the case has been settled, after it's been closed. She sent this letter to the judge. This is Michael Popak. We're going to use him a few times because we got to cover this. But, man, this is really dirty.
Michael Popak, Legal AF. If I were Judge Lewis Kaplan, federal judge, Southern District of New York, I report Alina Habba to the bar for an ethics investigation based on the new arguments that she just raised to distract from her poor lawyering that led to an $83 million verdict against Donald Trump based on the rape, defamation, and for punitive damages by a Manhattan jury. Now, Alina Habba argues for the first time in 3 years that back 30 years ago, for an 18-month period, Judge Lewis Kaplan was in the same law firm as Roberta Kaplan, no relation, the plaintiff's lawyer. And that 18-month or so overlap when Roberta Kaplan was a young associate and Lewis Kaplan was a partner is somehow unethical that he presided over the case. I don't even know where to start, but I'm...
All right, so this is why he's so shocked about this. So she sends a letter to the judge, and he'll read some of the letter in a minute here. She sends a letter to the judge saying, hey, 30 years ago, you worked with Roberta Kaplan, who was the attorney for E. Jean Carroll, right? Therefore, and she claimed that he mentored her or something, but he didn't. They were in the same office for 18 months. Then he got appointed to be a federal judge by Congress. But the firm they were at has over 1,000 lawyers and did back then. So he never met her. They were in completely different parts of the building. right? It's like working at a big corporation. You don't meet everybody. It just doesn't happen. Even then, the rule in New York, I looked it up, is this. If, let's say, I was a judge and you were the attorney, and we both worked at the same firm, and we knew each other, I would have to recuse myself from judging any case you were the lead attorney on, or you were the prosecutor or defendant or whatever. I would have to recuse myself if we worked together within the last 2 years. Or if it was a case that I had worked on, or if it was a client that you had that I had represented in the past, then it would be a conflict of interest, and I would recuse myself. She's saying 30 years ago, you guys worked at this firm. Since then, you've had almost no contact. Even when you were at the firm, you had no contact, right? But somehow this biases you and you have to recuse yourself. So it's all bullshit. But what's really funny about it is, instead of filing an motion to appeal, well, and furthermore, her evidence was really stupid. Her evidence is there was an article, and I think it was like the New York Post, which is a total right-wing rag. I mean, and they said they talked to an unnamed source who said that she was friends with the judge. E. Jean Carroll's lawyer was friends with the judge, which turns out not to be true. And they can't name the source. So you have hearsay from an unnamed person, and you're writing a New York Post article, a paper that's notorious for fucking up all the time. They're not even technically news. They're more entertainment. And that's Alina Habba's evidence. And so she writes a letter to the judge, a threatening letter, basically accusing him of being biased. And that's what she's going to base her appeal on? Well, why would you write a letter to the judge? There's no reason to write him a letter. File an appeal and put that in your appeal, and then the appeals court will ask the judge, to respond to that. So that's what she did. So she basically threatened the judge. She tried to blackmail the judge after the case to say he was being biased. And I'm going to have Michael Popok read some of the letter here.
Counter. Apologies to check out Counter Tabloids. So let me read from the letter, and then you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. Dear Judge Kaplan, written on her letterhead today. We'll put the picture up on it. This letter is submitted on behalf of President Donald J. Trump. Now remember, the judge already told her, stop calling him President Donald J. Trump. He's Donald John Trump. That's it. He doesn't get the president honorific. As a result of a story published in the New York Post, oh my God, I can't even get this out. Defense counsel learned for the first time of allegations that Your Honor, while a partner at the Paul Weiss firm, it's not even the proper name of the law firm, Alina, had a mentor-type relationship with plaintiff's lead counsel Roberta Kaplan. Hey, that's not exactly what the New York Post article says. It's uncorroborated, and I can't even believe that it would be true. And if it is true, it's something they knew or should have known 3 years ago and made a motion at that time.
Okay, so just to give you a taste of the letter there. So this is why this is so funny. She's saying the judge didn't disclose this and Roberta Kaplan didn't disclose this. So now it's essentially they're basically failed to disclose. So it's basically they committed, an ethical violation is what she's claiming, right? And that she's going to tag them with an ethical violation. Here's the thing, though. The judge, when he became a federal judge, all this was disclosed everywhere he's worked, right? Roberta Kaplan, as an attorney, has publicly disclosed everywhere she's worked. So this is public information that they both worked at that firm at about the same time for about 18 months when she first started and he was leaving. So they did disclose this decades ago. Right? This is all disclosed. On top of that fact, this is the same judge that overheard the first E. Jean Carroll trial 3 years ago. So the question is, why didn't you bring this up 3 years ago, Alina? And furthermore, if you're going to bring up this kind of stuff, you need to bring it up before the case and tell the judge you want him to recuse himself. In this case, he wouldn't have had
So
to.
again, she basically does not seem to know the actual process
And she dropped the ball. Yeah.
of like actually going to court.
Yeah. She doesn't know who she's facing or whatnot. She didn't know what their history was. She didn't look this up before. She got this because she read a New York Post article. Well, maybe, and this is what happened, which is really funny, was the Roberta Kaplan, who was the other attorney, so she accused them of bias. Roberta Kaplan wrote a letter to the court. So Habba said this in her letter too. She said, "This is news to us. We are going to include this in our appeal and take appropriate measures. The fact it wasn't disclosed is an ethics violation, all of which is bullshit." This is NBC News. During that relatively brief period more than 30 years ago, I do remember the Paul Weiss partners with whom I worked, and none of them was Your Honor. More specifically, I have no recollection from that time period of ever interacting with Your Honor on a case, participating with Your Honor in a client or case-related meeting, or attending a court proceeding with Your Honor. In fact, I remember no direct interaction from that time period with Your Honor at all, which makes sense. It was 1,000 lawyers in that firm. Needless to say, at no point have we ever had a mentor-type relationship, as alleged by Ms. Habba, the attorney said. So she goes down to say, well, Ms. Habba ends her letter by characterizing this as a troubling matter. What's actually troubling is both the substance and timing of her false accusations and impropriety. From the very start of the recently concluded trial, Donald Trump and Ms. Habba have pushed a false narrative of judicial bias so that they could characterize any jury verdict against Trump as the product of a corrupt system. Well, that strategy has now moved into its post-verdict phase, which is a really nice way of saying that. It's now time for defendants' false, infectious claims of bias or impropriety to stop. The purpose of the letter was, and then Habba responded, because what ended up happening was Roberta Kaplan said, I'm going to file sanctions against Ms. Habba because she's essentially trying to blackmail the judge by writing him a letter. This is an inappropriate letter to be writing the judge. And she's trying to threaten the judge to try, I don't know, reverse the case or something. I don't know what it is. I'm going to file an ethics violation against you if he doesn't say, oh, no, I fucked up or something. Right?
Yeah, like what's the strategy here?
Yeah, other than to threaten him or try to blackmail him, there's no strategy. So she's actually now...
Yeah, it doesn't seem like one.
So she's actually committed an ethics violation by threatening to tag them with an ethics violation they didn't commit. So she's... The case is over. And now she's fucked it up, and Roberta Kaplan is going to recommend sanctions with the bar, the New York State Bar, and I would be shocked if the judge doesn't do it as well. So she could be looking at getting her license suspended or revoked permanently in New York, her bar license, because of this bullshit. After she lost, she should have just filed the appeal and moved forward. She shouldn't have done any of this shit. And of course, when Roberta Kaplan responded immediately to that, saying she was going to threaten sanctions, this was Alina Habba's response back to the judge right after Roberta Kaplan's letter. The purpose of the letter was simply to inquire as to whether there is any merit to a recently published New York Post story which reported on the alleged existence of such a relationship. Since Ms. Kaplan has now denied that there is ever a mentor-mentee relationship between herself and Your Honor, the issue has seemingly been resolved. So now she's saying, oh, you're going to sanction me. Oh, let's just drop the whole thing. Let's forget it ever happened.
People are just so stupid.
Well, here's the problem, too. And Roberta Kaplan sort of alluded to this. She didn't make an accusation, but she alluded to, how did the New York Post get this story? Right? In all likelihood, Alina Habba probably leaked it to them so she could use it as her bullshit evidence. So if they investigate this and they go to the New York Post, the bar does, and they find out, oh, yeah, no, we got it from Alina, now she's really cooked. So this woman cannot stop screwing up. No matter what she does, she cannot stop screwing up. God, she's just a
So
gift. Go ahead.
the question is she that stupid or is she that entitled? I sometimes struggle to see the difference between whether somebody's really that dumb or super entitled. Because theoretically, if you could become a lawyer, you must be pretty smart, at least in some respect, because it takes a lot of studying to get there. However, she does all this stupid stuff, so I just can't tell. Like, does she have like no sense about her? Or is she super entitled and just thinks she's above all of it and she can get away with whatever she wants?
No, I think she was a low-level kind of attorney with not a lot of experience. She couldn't get with a firm, so her and her buddy started their own firm. Then she got the opportunity to suck up to Trump, and she did that by basically committing a huge ethics violation and defrauding the woman who was suing Mar-a-Lago for sexual assault. Right, and now that her bar license is up for jeopardy for that case in Florida. Right, where she tricked that woman, and that whole deal got rescinded. The woman's resuing, and Alina Habba might get sued next. But then she got with Trump, and she's been paid what $3.5 million, but she's already been sanctioned for over like $1.5 million, and she's looking at losing her bar license, and she's looking at probably getting sanctioned some more and getting some other fines and stuff attached. So that 3.5 might be gone before she can spend it. But the thing about it too is they were interviewing E. Jean Carroll and Roberta Kaplan, and I didn't pull that clip, but you kind of brought it up. But Roberta Kaplan was saying, it's funny, Alina Habba, when Trump wasn't there, she was all right. She was pretty calm. She was, but when Trump was there, he spent the whole time talking in her ear, and she was a menace. Probably because he kept pushing her and pushing her and pushing her, because he's trying to do it as a campaign. But I don't think he ever thought that it was going to be 83.3 million. That's a huge figure for a settlement like this.